Hello and welcome. In this video, I'm going to show you how I made this cute little bright, fun card using the Homemade Sweetness Sweet collection from Stampin' Up. I did share this card on my social media on a reel and a short video, and I had some questions about especially the dimensions of these strips and kind of if I had a tutorial available. So I thought I would go ahead and make a longer video with all the sizing and instructions here on my YouTube channel. So stick around and we'll get started. To make this card, we're using the Homemade Sweetness Sweet collection. We're mostly going to be using the designer series paper from the collection. I did do a video on my channel where I introduced you to the entire suite. I went through the paper in detail and the stamps and dies in detail. So I'll link that here so you can see that if you want to see that in more detail. So mostly using the designer series paper. I won't be using the stamp set at all. The stamp set and dies that coordinate with that suite are called the Filled with Sweetness stamp set and dies. And really the only dies I'm going to be using are the flowers and this little tag for our sentiment. In this version of the card, I did use the sentiment from the Filled with Sweetness set, but today I thought I would pull in the Reason to Celebrate stamp set. This is an awesome set. If you need just kind of a good year-round go-to sentiment collection, I really recommend looking into this. I love the fonts. They're kind of fun. They're kind of that big, blocky, playful sentiment, you know, the script, or not script, but the fonts, and then there is a little bit of script writing in here as well that you can mix in with it. So I thought I would make this into a happy birthday card today. And then other than white cardstock and adhesives and maybe a little bit of string, I am going to be pulling in my favorite embossing folder today, the Forever Plaid 3D embossing folder. I did do some prep work before starting the video today just to save a little bit of time, but I wanted to show you this is the piece of designer series paper that I used to cut out my fruit. On the back is kind of a textured blue pattern. This kind of looks like the jelly or jam that might be in a jar, you know, maybe the blueberries or the blackberries, but on the opposite side is where those nice big images, really colorful, pretty images of the fruit are. They're very easy to cut out just with a scissor. And, you know, you can kind of take your pick as far as which ones you want to cut out. There's still the cherries and raspberries that I haven't used. My goal with this card was to have kind of a rainbow of the strips of paper that coordinate with this collection, and then coordinate it with one of the pieces of fruit in that kind of that same color. So I had, you know, the strawberry for the Strawberry Slush, this orange slice for the Calypso Coral, this peach slice goes with the crushed curry. I ended up using the blackberry because it has the green stem at the top to go with the granny apple green, and then I used the blueberries down here on the Secret Sea. Now, of course, I could have swapped these around. I didn't have a green fruit, so that's why I had to pick something that had green on it. So I could have also picked the cherry or the raspberry, but I figured you know, I didn't want to pull in another one of those kind of reddish colors down at the bottom. So that was kind of my reasoning for, you know, putting it in the order that I did. So let me kind of show you the details of the sizes, the cuts, and things that you're going to need. I have an A2 size card base out of basic white cardstock. This is 4 1/4 by 11 inches. I did score it at 5 1/2 inches. So we're going to have a top fold card base. And then my next sheet of paper, or my next layer on top of that, is designer series paper from the collection. This is the Misty Moonlight and White checkered paper. I just think that's so cute and fun. It makes me think of picnics and summertime. On the back of that is some ladybugs and daisies, another really cute pattern, but that's going to be on top here. This is cut at 4 inches by 5 1/4. I do have my strips of paper here. I'm going to show you the dimensions of those in just a minute. The length doesn't matter because we're going to use a scissor to cut them down. For die cuts, I have the label or the little tag die from the collection. I have 5 of the little flowers. There's 2 die cuts, so I just ran it through 3 times, two at a time, and then a single one. And then like I said, I fussy cut the 5 different pieces of fruit. Actually, it was 6 because the blueberries, I wanted 3 blueberries total, and there was one that came as 2 and one as 1. So got all those cut out. Now let me show you. I am gonna bring in these other card panels and I wrote the dimensions on them. So I'm going to zoom in, and then if you want to take a screenshot of this, I'll try to also have the dimensions maybe listed below or somewhere else, but it might be easiest just to do a screenshot. So let me zoom in just a tad. And I'm going to talk through this. So your colored strips, you want each one to be 7/8 inch tall. Let me move my finger in case you're trying to do a screenshot. I found that worked best. I didn't want them to be 1 inch because I thought that would be too big. It would take up too much room on the card. I didn't want them to be 3/4 of an inch. I felt like that wasn't big enough to really hold that piece of fruit off on the side. So 7/8 of an inch is what I ended up with. So each one of these I cut at 7/8 of an inch tall. They're going to end up being 3 1/8 inch wide by the time we trim them down. But like I said, I started with them just whatever length. You know, I had some scrap pieces I was trimming off, so some of them are shorter, some are longer. I'm going to use my scissor to cut the excess off at the end. I have a white piece of cardstock here that's 3 1/8 inch wide by 4 5/16 tall. That's the piece that we're going to stick each of these colored strips to, all the way down. Then, and there won't be any white showing on this by the time we're done. After I trim the edges, we'll run it through the embossing folder, the plaid embossing folder, and then that's going to get mounted on top of this white piece. This is what's going to give us this little border all the way around those colored strips. This piece of white cardstock is 3 1/4 inches by 4 1/2 inches tall. And then that will get mounted on top of the plaid designer series paper and card base. So those are the dimensions that we need for this card. Okay, so I'm going to start adhering my colored strips to this little card panel that we have. I'm going to actually use the ones that I wrote on. So this is at 3 1/8 by 4 5/16. And I'm going to start with Strawberry Slush at the top. And you can decide, do you want the darker color, the darker shade? I should back up. I'm using two-tone cardstock, and that was so that I could pick, did I want the lighter shade or the darker shade for each one? I wanted to really kind of be able to mix and match and pick which shade I really felt looked best with this card and looked best with the fruit that I had cut out. So that's why I'm using the two-tone cardstock. You can certainly just use regular cardstock for this as well. I love the two-tone cardstock because you can pick the different shades, and then once we run it through with the embossing folder, some of that white core is going to show through, and I just like the added texture and dimension that gives to a project. So that's my personal, I guess, preference when it comes to that. So I'm just, giving you options. So for the Strawberry Slush piece, I did choose to use the darker shade. Let me just make sure I'm centered on here. And all I did was just put adhesive, just a tape runner. You could use glue if you wanted, but I felt like it was probably just as easy to run. I mean, and people have different methods of adhering things. You might have one of those Xyron sticker makers that you can run it through and make the whole side sticky at once. Use whatever you want, but I just like to do a few strips of the tape runner. And I'm just lining up one end of my strip and the top, pressing it down, and then we'll just leave all these tails sticking off the end until the edge until the end, and then go through and trim them with a scissor. And the Calypso Coral's the next one. I liked the lighter color. I felt that looked better with that orange slice. So that's going to come right underneath there. Line it up with, again, the edge and then the bottom of the Strawberry Slush. Okay, Crushed Curry is next. And that one, I guess I used the darker shade. That one, I feel like it's a little bit closer when you look at the two sides. It's not quite as far apart as some of them, the lighter and darker shade of it. Okay, Granny Apple Green is next, and I am using the darker side. If you want, you can leave your two-tone cardstock hanging off both sides. If you feel like you didn't get a real straight cut, and trim both sides once you're done, that's totally okay too. I see that my Granny Apple Green is not real straight, so I'll see if I can kind of straighten that up. It's not going to be that big of a deal because we will have the fruit down that side too, kind of covering some of those little blemishes. And then for the Secrecy, I did use the dark color as well. Okay. And you know, we're all human, so when we cut things out, it may not be perfect. I do have a little bit of the white showing here at the bottom. I'm going to trim that off as well. So now what I'll do is just flip this over and use a scissor. Any scissor will do, or paper trimmer. And just slice all these off, and then you can save what's left and do another card or use these for something else. Here's where I'm going to see if I can trim that little bit of Granny Apple Green that's sticking off. And I'm going to just try to cut off this white that's showing at the bottom. All right, good. And then I'm going to put this into my Forever Plaid embossing folder, and I'll run that through my embossing machine, and I'll be right back. All right, and here's that embossed piece with all of our really pretty stripes on here. I'm going to adhere that directly onto our next panel. This one is that 3 1/4 by 4 1/2. Just try to get it centered the best I can. And now that I'm putting this down, I can see I have a little bit extra white, again, on either the top or bottom. So I'm going to take this to my paper trimmer and trim a little bit of that off. So maybe you even want to do like 4 3/8 or something like that instead of 4 1/2 when you're cutting that panel. You'll have to kind of see. Again, sometimes if these are off by just a little bit, it can make a difference on that final result. Okay, so I am going to just go ahead and get this checkered Misty Moonlight and White piece down on my card base. This one should have about 1/8 of an inch border all the way around in white. I did trim a little bit of that off. My white borders aren't completely even, but that's okay. And then I am popping this panel up just to give it a little dimension. And I'll center that on that checkered piece. Okay, and then we can go ahead and start embellishing by adding our fruit. Actually, why don't we go ahead and stamp our sentiment so that, I mean, it doesn't need a ton of time to dry, but it can dry a little bit while we're doing the rest of this. So like I said, I'm going to do this as a birthday card, and I grabbed the happy and the birthday from that Reason to Celebrate stamp set. Just ink that up. And then happy, let's see. I'm gonna sneak it right up there at the top. All right. I feel like you can never have too many birthday cards, so it's always a safe bet to do one of those. Okay, well, let's move that to the side and start adhering the fruit now. So again, we're going to start with the strawberry at the top, and I popped all these up on dimensionals and then glued the flowers down flat. So I have my mini dimensionals here, and I'm going to just start. I'll just grab one little dimensional, and I want to adhere my fruit right on that coordinating color. Actually, let's move that over just a tish because I'm looking at my sample and I want to tuck one of the little flowers up over here. For the orange, it's a bigger piece, so I'm going to do a couple dimensionals. And the peach, same thing. Oops. And then the blackberry. And the blueberries. So for the blueberries, I have the little two that are together and then a single one. And I'm going to put the dimensional toward the bottom of the single one. Take a look to see where that's at. There we go. I've got these little backers all over the place. And then I can just kind of push it right up there, and that bottom dimensional doesn't interfere with the fruit there. Okay, and then let's go ahead and get those flowers glued on. Okay, and if you've seen me glue anything before, if it's a small die cut, I usually like to grab it with a reverse tweezer and then use my little bottle of glue that has the, you know, more fine nozzle on it, so I can kind of control the glue and my fingers don't have to hang on to these little die cuts. And we'll just tuck that one right there. So I'm just going to repeat this for all 5, kind of make my way down. You'll see that I have these kind of alternating back and forth, but then the pattern changes once I get down to where the sentiment's going to be. So we did left, right, left, and then I'm going to skip down and do left again because I wanted the white sentiment tag to have space over here. So I'm going to put that flower there. This one here, and then we'll grab the sentiment. And I'm just going to show a little bit of a trick that I sometimes do. I like to kind of sometimes curve my sentiment strips and put a dimensional right in that curve to hold it up. So let me just I'm just going to grab a big one. And then I'll use glue, or actually I use my tape runner since I have it here. Use tape runner on both ends to hold it down. Well, I don't know if I got any on this end here. Okay. Have tape runner on both ends with that dimensional in the middle. And I'm going to just tuck that right up under there. Let it kind of have that bump up in the middle so it kind of looks a little more wavy. The dimensional will hold it up. And then I am going to add just a little bow with some white twine. So I have my white twine here. Just tie my little bow. Oops. Kind of let it go. So now it's a little bigger than I wanted. There we go. Tighten all that. These scissors are a little bit dull. Okay, and then I like to just take a glue dot. I have these mini glue dots that I get from Stampin' Up. Grab one of them on the back of my bow and then just stick it right down where I want it. So there we go. And there's our cute, colorful rainbow fruit card. I just think it's so fun and fresh and bright. A really fun kind of springy summertime card. And then this one specifically birthday, that'll be fun to send out to somebody. So thank you so much for joining me today. I really hope that you enjoyed the video and have a great rest of your day.